Greetings, nobles and noble women. Welcome to the Trust Issue Cipher. As usual, I like to jump right into it. As you can see, the title of this show is called How to Spiritually Empower Your Trust. And though it may appear to be spookism when you first read the title, I'm going to show you how this is done on a masterful mass scale level. And we participate in it every day. The difference is you don't empower your trust or your ancestors. You empower the ancestors and trust of people who would see you dead in the streets. Now, I know that sounds, a little wild, but ride with me for a while and I'll prove it to you beyond the shadow of a doubt. Now, when we think of trust, we think of two things: either the confidence we have in a particular concept or being, or the documents used to establish a wealth and or asset management device or contract. Now, I'm speaking generally, but as you partly already know, a trust, much like a corporation, is a legal person. Now, what is a legal person and how does that provide an advantage to you? In law, a legal person is any legal entity that can do the things an everyday person can usually do in law, such as enter into contracts, sue and be sued, own property, and so on. The reason for the term legal person is that some legal persons are not people. Some legal persons are not people. Did you get that? Meaning some people are legal persons. That's for later. Companies and corporations are persons, legally speaking. They can legally do most of the things an ordinary person can do, but they are clearly not people in the ordinary sense. Now, you may say that has nothing to do with me, so why are you reading that, Usman? Well, of course it does. It's this little statute that allows the court to sue you like a living being, even though you may not have hurt or even offended anyone, a live human being. If you roll a stop sign, who did you hurt? Who did you even offend? Okay? Cop pulls you over, gives you a ticket, they pull off, you flip them the bird, trash the ticket. All right? 60 days later, you have a warrant and an order to appear in court. Next thing you know, you're getting sued. Not by an offended bystander, not even by the cop who gave you the ticket, but the people or the state. But we're going to talk about the people right now. How can people who never witnessed a thing sue you? Well, let's see who these people are. Let's look at the court. A court is any person or institution, often as a government institution, with the authority to adjudicate legal disputes between parties and carry out the administration of justice in civil, criminal, and administrative matters in accordance with the rule of law. So it says a government institution. Let's look at that. A government is the system or group of people governing an organized community, often a state, but also other entities, like, for example, companies, especially in the case of colonial companies. Now let's look at this interesting word, colonial company. A chartered company is an association with investors or shareholders that is incorporated and granted rights, often exclusive rights, by royal charter, Queen of England, or similar instrument of government for the purpose of trade, exploration, and or colonization. Now we see that shareholders are a corporate instrument. We see the incorporation right here. So there's no doubt we're dealing with corporate entities grouped together for the purpose of profit. But who are these shareholders? And why does it say the people versus you on your court summons? Who are these people? A cop stops you and gave you the ticket, and you don't see this guy complaining about me injuring him or harming him in any way. So who are these people that are mad at me for making a mistake on the road? So let's go back to legal person. Now we're going to go to juridical person. A juridical person is a non-human legal entity. In other words, any organization that is not a single natural person, but is authorized by law with duties and rights and is recognized as a legal person and as having a distinct identity. This includes any incorporated organizations, including corporations, government agencies, and NGOs, also known as artificial person, juridical entity, juridic person, juristic person, or legal person. But on your court summons, it says the people versus you. Now, because some people think that the word people only applies to living beings, that's not true. We can find that right here in the definition. A people is a plurality of persons, considered as a whole, as is the case with an ethnic group or nation. But don't let that fool you. They're not talking about rural people because down here in the law realm, it clearly states, the people identifies the entire body of the citizens of a jurisdiction invested with political power or gathered for political purposes. People invested or citizens invested with political power or gathered for a political purpose does not necessarily describe the average citizen. And they use the word citizen. So they can't be talking about a corporation, correct? Wrong. As we go back here to legal persons, since the 19th century, legal personhood has been further construed to make it a citizen, resident, or domiciliary of a state, usually for the purposes of personal jurisdiction. In Louisville C&CR Company versus Letson, the Supreme Court held that for the purposes of the case at hand, a corporation is capable of being treated as a citizen of the state which created it as much as a natural person. All right, so no confusion there. Now we still have to contend with this group of people that are taking you to court. So we go back here to examples of juridical persons, which includes, and remember, juridical persons are legal persons. We saw that earlier. Sovereign states. So states are legal persons. Municipal corporations. A municipality is usually a single administrative division having corporate status and powers of self-government or jurisdiction as granted by national and regional laws to which it is subordinate. It is to be distinguished usually from the county, which may encompass rural territory or numerous small communities such as towns, villages, and hamlets. All right, so that's a city because they didn't mention city in any other place. And they did say that the county was a municipality, which is a person, because it said it is to be distinguished. When they say it, they mean the city. The city is to be distinguished usually from the county. Not always. Therefore, a county can be a municipality. Therefore, the county can be a person. So these people taking you to court are the city, the county, and the state. So you're still not convinced? Well, let's bring it home. This is a download from the Kern County Court's government site, and it outlines where the money for traffic tickets go. So we go here and we see the summary. When the court imposes a 100 base fine for a city arrest of a violation in the vehicle code, the court is required by statute to collect a total of $490. 100 is allocated between the city and the county in accordance with section 1463.002 of the Penal Code. 310 to the various penalty assessments and 20% state surcharge as described above. There it is. So we see who the people are when you're in court facing charges. We thought that when we get tickets or go to court, the money goes to the city for upkeep, when actually the city, the county, and the state are running a train on you. Now, in some states, they actually title the cases as the state of, or the state versus the defendant. Well, that can mean that the state itself and the federal government are involved, but that's a whole different breakdown. And also, the county usually is not considered a municipality by itself, but if it merges or is receiving money as a shareholder with the city and the state, then we have to conclude from evidence it and they are acting as persons or people. See, fam, it's one thing to be told this stuff and say, well, I know that already, but if you don't know where to go to substantiate what you know, you can't draft your documents with the language to reflect you know these things. Remember that. Now, how does this figure in with spirituality empowering your trust and establishing a trust with your ancestors? All right, we're going to explore that after the break. right, family, we are back. We are back. So, continuing on, we see how they can turn the city, the county, and the state into people. And they can sue the shit out of you and take your money. Now, where do they get the balls to do that? How? Honoring their ancestors. That's how. The powers that exist have brought this trust polity to life. It acts through the confederation of people called states, municipalities, etc. Now, we saw earlier some of these constituents were called shareholders, signifying incorporation, which is a chartered trust, right? Operating through trust, they claim personhood, and we pay tribute by allowing the robbery. We have no choice. But they're using the names of massive things we know to exist, massive entities, massive visions, to hide behind while their thoughts and their wills manipulate us out of money and resources. When you look at a piece of paper and it implies a whole state or a whole state full of people are accusing you of a crime, most people subconsciously acquiesce under that type of intimidation, and understandably so. When I fought and won an arrest warrant case for brandishing, I studied relentlessly. Once you study something to the point where you understand exactly what your position is and what their position is, wherever you want to move from that point becomes much easier. It becomes much easier to decide, and the people don't look so vast. All of a sudden, it comes down to, a man who may not even be prepared as you, who can't even articulate his point beyond what's written on his opposition of motion. From there, you can look back and see how overcomplicated all these titles and entities make things appear. And that's the trick, using entities to shield the small wizard behind the curtain. When we think court, we think of a system refined over many years, so we're effectively programmed with these associations subconsciously. When we think of police, we see one individual, but subconsciously, the eye sees an army, because we know that if we strike that one person down, we'll be on the run from a small army of people, sanctioned to shoot without regard for the rest of our lives, or until we get caught. That's why they can kill quickly or slowly in broad daylight and not even be interrupted by spectators. The risk to defend life from their monopoly on violence is too high for most people. But now, if we saw just an individual and we had fair access to court adjudication on an even playing field with the right to concealed carry, just those two dynamics would make it much harder for them to do the things that they do with impunity. Now, if we knew only how to pierce and extract equality from the massive entity that is the state that they hide behind, as well as entities being brought to life, a unit of people can bring to life their ancestors. Tribes do it all the time. Look at what the Whanganui Maori tribe did with their sacred river in New Zealand. The Whanganui River in New Zealand is a legal person. A nearby forest is too. Soon, the government will grant a mountain legal personhood as well. Here's how it happened and what it may mean. The Uttarakhand High Court of India is making the Ganges River a living entity so that if they catch someone polluting it, they can charge them with the same crimes that carry the weight of harming human beings. Now, how powerful will that make their law? Think of how that affects the mind of people who accept that concept, willingly or otherwise. Now, you think they'll throw trash in the river, knowing that that's the type of charge that will be levied against them? And in the case of the Whanganui tribe, they named the river after their ancestors, a powerful concept to subconsciously alter the minds of people who then have to respond consciously. I hope you get what's happening here. The European has made his ancestor spirits ever present in this land, so much so that his ancestors speak lies, treachery, and self-hate to black people all over the world. And they listen. They listen and they destroy the original man and woman's legacy day by day and make it hard for us to discern our enemies from our allies. And I'm just talking about black people who accept and carry out these subconscious messages. It's going to take a whole different video to go over how Europeans exploit this dynamic. When you're submerged in the names, cultures, language, and power of another people, it is almost certain that you'll see yourself as nothing and the dominant culture as everything. And eventually, from that point, all types of sicknesses come about. This is why we need our ancestors, and we need to bring them to life first in our lives, and as we grow wiser in the ways of subconscious influence for us and others, we bring them to life in our overall culture that way. You want to know why we're on the bottom? Other cultures keep their language, their gods, their deities, their customs, all which ground them in the power of their cultural spirit, no matter the fact that they're also surrounded by European ethos. A people will not do well without the aid of their ancestors. That realm is a part of your life. That ancestor realm should be accessed and manifested identical to the same way your thoughts, which are on an etheric realm, manifest into your third dimension active motion and speech. You consult the etheric forces to help you move or navigate the third dimension, the third realm. The reason they tell you to put pictures on your altars and ancestral communication is because that brings the image of that entity to your mind, which gives it energy and life. Most of us know that. And that's grossly evident. What do you think colonizers are doing when they put pictures of slave masters on the money everyone has to look at continually? We look at and lust those images minute by minute because they're keeping a trust agreement with their gods and ancestors, and thereby hijacking our minds to do the same thing. Money is one of the most esoteric energies and symbolisms in existence. Why do you think so much goes into the design? And they tell you it's a trust contract established with the ancestors right on the front. They tell you that. And right on the back they put, "In God we trust." And the picture of the ancestor on the front. And for those of you who think God only means a supernatural being floating in the sky, you're way behind. Sorry. Just a few Google taps will show you even the origin of that word didn't mean that. With practically everyone's mind on their money and their money on their minds, at some point in time, how much power is available to harness and influence the minds of people with these symbolisms? They submerge us in the energy of their ancestors. They keep the trust with their ancestors, even if their ancestors were slave masters and evil mass murderers of Native American people. They still worship them religiously, while making us neglect our ancestors and giving energy to theirs. That's why they do well on this plane, because they honor their ancestors, while most Aboriginal people turn away from theirs. They gave us Jesus, who supposedly told us worshiping magic and ancestors was heresy. But the same folks who gave you Jesus got Masonic symbols all over the place. We call on gods they create. We learn their ancestors in school for 12 years. Call on their ancestors in science. The 40-watt light bulb. Watt is named after their ancestor, James Watt. 40 degrees Celsius, named after a Swede, Anders Celsius. 12-volt battery. The volt is from Alessandro Volta. Megahertz, named after Heinrich Hertz. We call on their ancestors in the shoes we sport. Adidas, shoes made by Adolf Dassler, a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party from 1933 to 1945. Puma, created by Rudolf Dassler, another member of the Nazi Party. Ferdinand Porsche, a Nazi. Carl Benz, creator of Mercedes-Benz, who, along with another man, forced people to build machines for the Nazi war effort. The gods we call on are their creations, their religious books. which are rife with Greek mythology, beings that we speak into existence on a daily basis. Apollo, Zeus, Chaos, Hypnos, Nemesis, Uranus, Atlas. They name churches we frequent after their deities. Mary Immaculate, the Mary Immaculate Church, the Mary Immaculate Hospital in New York, St. Peter's Church, hundreds of them all over the world, even in China. And the same situations with St. Peter's hospitals. I mean, do I need to go on? And all what I just mentioned is just the ancestral and deity aspect of our indoctrination. I didn't even get into the language aspect. I didn't mention the fact that we are not Englishmen, but we speak English, which is a Germanic language composed of Latin and French and relative to Dutch and Norse. Where are we in all this? Dave Chappelle talked on this special, 846, about how George Floyd called on his mother just before he was ambushed and murdered in cold blood. And Dave also said his father, Dave's father, called on his grandfather or grandmother before he transitioned. People see the spirits of loved ones because the ancestors are always near. When the emotional content is extreme, people often call them out. And this is observed so much by people who work in hospice care, where the caregivers witness elderly people pass away frequently. And people who work with the terminally ill report the same thing. They call it near-death awareness. Proof that the ancestors are always close. And they affect this world whether we bring them into our lives agreeably or in extreme emotional states. We have to bring our ancestors to life by naming trusts, children, religious organizations, etc. after them, as well as calling upon them directly in our rituals and making them a part of historical records so that we put them close in our daily lives and establish a trust with them, which will also bring their powers close to us. Now, the beast knows this. Why do you think he submerges us in his ancestral energy? From religion to commerce and everything in between, while manipulating us to move away from our ancestral connections. We can't do that. We can't do that and survive, nobles. All right? So, this has been another issue or another segment of the Trust Issue Cipher. And until our next show, peace.